I hear these rumors or these claims that the state is trying to break down the nuclear family. And I
Uh-huh.
understand that there are certain policies that the state implements, and they get rid of the language, don't use the term parent, mother and
Hmm.
father, use parentage, or, we're going to promote non-traditional social family structures or
Hmm.
non-traditional marriages, and, we'll make gender a social construct. And I understand how these things can erode at the nuclear family. But I'm wondering, do you think that there's actually something intentional that they really want to get rid of the nuclear traditional family? Or is this just them going on their kind of progressive inclusivity train that's kind of gone off the
Right.
rails a little bit, and these
Yeah,
are
I think
unintended
it's yeah,
consequences?
I think it's mostly the latter. I mean that most of the people that are behind this that advocate these kind of policies are not so much intent on destroying the nuclear family as I think in a way you have to take them as their word that they want to celebrate alternatives. Now, in doing that, they end up, um, I, s- I think, perhaps unintentionally, maybe to some extent, intentionally devaluing the nuclear family. They knock it off its pedestal. I think that you have to say that is intentional. It's not supposed to be on a pedestal. It's supposed to be equal with every alternative, right? And they don't see a problem with that. They don't. They say, we're just all, every expression of family, every form of family is equally valid. That's the new world that we live in, and we can all be happy. Um, I think I would just argue against them that really the nuclear family, the traditional nuclear family, is the building block of any society. That's where how new children are brought into the world and educated, and that's how we create our next generation. That's how society continues. Um, and you simply can't. That should be at the center of, that should be what's celebrated. That should be what's standard. Every society needs a center, and I think that's something maybe they just don't understand. Now, there are some people that clearly are just driven by hate, and for whatever reason, I think they really do want to tear down the nuclear family. They just as soon see it gone. Maybe it was some childhood experience or whatever, but they're more of an exception to the rule.
So, what are some of the problems that arise when we start to break this down and don't put the nuclear family as the core building block of a society? Because I agree. No, it sounds nice to say all family structures should be equal, and I don't think we should discriminate against other people's, way of life or whatever. But I inherently kind of understand that there's something very important about having this traditional nuclear family as a young father myself. But how would you respond to people saying that? Like, what's wrong with, what's wrong with having all these different family structures on equal footing and promoting these alternative lifestyles more? How does that break down society?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it is a man and a woman that procreates, right? That brings new life into the world. I mean, it's pretty basic on that level.
Well, now that's
And then,
controversial, I guess. So
okay,
it's
yeah, it shouldn't be. See, that's the problem, and it's the most essential thing. Um, yeah, sometimes it's hard to argue these things intellectually. These are things that that you feel or you just know. It was something that we all knew at one time. The kind of things that are advocated now were unthinkable. Even a couple of generations ago. Well, yeah, I don't know. Let me think about it a bit.
yeah,
I think there's a lot to be said, but it's something I just need to collect my thoughts on. And
yeah. I think
yeah.
it's just when I try to think about the breakdown of just sort of American society and how it's. I've seen a change just in my 10 years away from the United States, coming back here, that there is a fundamental shift. It's hard to put your finger on what exactly is wrong, but I think a lot of it is tied to the fact that the nuclear family isn't being protected and supported enough. The idea
Uh-huh.
that a nuclear family is really the best form of governance you have,
Right.
and you start to break it down, and then you get more and more people that are start to marry the government or the state instead of of taking care of themselves within their own family. And then I think the problem is once sort of these alternative lifestyles that sort of only exists with essentially state subsidies, when it starts to be threatened, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be promoting this type of alternative lifestyle or whatever, they feel that as a direct attack on them. And I think that's why the pushback is so strong, even though it isn't a majority. Um, and it's just it's interesting. It's an interesting problem, and I don't understand maybe the best way to resolve this, because I
Hmm.
obviously want to treat everybody very nicely, and I don't bear ill will towards anybody, but I do see that there is a problem in Western societies now, that we are kind of almost demonizing slightly the traditional family,
Hmm.
or Christianity. And actually,
Hmm.
that's something I think also feels uncomfortable for a lot of people. When I was watching the RNC, a lot of the talks and speeches were always included God and
Hmm.
included Jesus, and we're us as a Christian nation. And I think that makes a lot of non-Christians, or at least maybe probably not even so much non-Christians, probably more white liberal atheists
Right.
upset and uncomfortable.
Hmm.
How do you feel about that, including God into speeches
Well,
and talking about
yeah,
it? And I also don't like it that much with politics, because I feel like, are you just using this
yeah,
thing for to promote
right.
some? Because both
Well,
sides can evoke the supernatural.
sure. Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't make a blanket condemnation against invoking God, um, but yeah, like you say, these are politicians, and I think they're using God as a vote getter for them. I mean, I must just be pretty cynical about it. Um, if and these if it had a real impact on their policies, but I think maybe it does. You'll find people that are self-confessed Christians are less likely to support transgender operations on children or whatever. Hey, and these kind of issues, there is a difference, and their Christianity really means something. When we get to geopolitics, as we see, it doesn't seem
I
to
was about
mean
to say,
anything. If anything, it's they're yeah, it's a completely twisted
right.
Christianity that actually results in very unchristian policies and consequences. So yeah, I would rather I'd rather have be honest, even I'm a believing Orthodox Christian, but I'd rather have a secular politician who never mentioned God, but who actually ended the wars. I think
Mm,
that would be a more Christian thing to do.
right.
I would prefer that once again we have a Christian nation at some point, but we're so far from it that it's almost invoking God and pretending that it's almost like we're just pretending to be a religious nation, and when we really aren't. I think this is
Mm,
something that probably has to be built up, from from ground up, the way
mm,
that early Christianity was too. And eventually, if you have real strong churches, real strong believing communities, eventually it will have its impact on politics. But I think we need to go make it real and try to, you know, uh, Christians have to work on being Christians first of all, and that's a real effort. And Christian communities have to, really build themselves up and strengthen their own faith. They're really so weak and scattered and confused at this point that trying to make a change at the top is only going to end in disaster, and it's probably only going to um, further harm the reputation of Christianity.
mm. Yeah, I
Just one thing
feel.
about families, though, just to, there's a lot that you said. I don't have a full answer for you, but um, the consequences of broken families are obvious. I think we probably, well, some of us probably listening have come from broken families. Others have observed them. The consequences are real. And again, it's something that you can see in your own experience, but then the people who study it find, yeah, there's no question that kids that come out of broken families just tend to have much higher rates of drug abuse and suicide and so on and so forth. It has a profound effect on a society. So we really do have a need. I mean, it's not just some sort of religious preference or something. It's just there's an obvious, urgent need to strengthen families, to hold them together. It's hard. Uh, all of our, us individuals, we have our faults, and relationships are often can be difficult to support. So we need the support of a society around us to, married couples do, to get through difficult times. You need to have, you need this, the support of the greater society. So it's important, for example, that fathers really should receive praise for being good fathers, and mothers good praise for being good mothers. They should be roles that we really value because they're tremendously important roles. These aren't just sort of lifestyle preferences. This is what builds a society. This is what brings new children into the world. This is what makes them into citizens. More than anything else. So we'd be just foolish not to. But you have this tendency to, especially to denigrate fathers. So I think you probably feel there's just in the culture and the it's sitcoms or whatever. There used to be back in the 50s what you had fathers were depicted as wise and as leaders, but now they're constantly the butt of jokes. Sometimes they can be funny jokes. You think about Homer Simpson or whatever,
Hmm.
but they're always sort of, it's like obviously not. You get the sense that he's not really a valued and revered member of society, and he should be, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's part of what we have to do because it's actually very hard being a father. It
Hmm.
can be at times. It can be very rewarding too, as you know, but it can be
Hmm.
hard. And the whole society should be supporting both fathers and mothers and families as a whole. And it's just like if you're going to look at it in kind of a rather maybe crude calculating way, but a realistic way. You just say like, what do you invest in for a healthy society? You ought to be focusing on really the core institution and the alternative lifestyles. I'm sorry, but that's not what builds your society. You can make an argument for tolerance, but that's not what you put at center stage. I think the family again should be back, the nuclear family back on the pedestal. We don't let's not pretend that they're all equal. They're not.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that the state wants broken families? Because if you think about it in a way, the churches, nuclear families, these are forms of governance that are kind of competing with the state. If you have more broken people and broken families, then they end up going to go to the church of the state in a way that this is becomes, and that gives the state more power. You get more and more people that are relying on the state to sort of support their lifestyle, to support
Yeah.
the path that they've chosen. And you're able to also, from the leftist point of view, is to show that you're a very loving and caring people, that you're
Uh-huh.
taking all these broken people and lifting them up and helping them. So
Uh-huh.
it's wrapped in this very,
Yeah.
very
I
nice,
think
cozy
probably
wrapper.
right. I
Um,
think you actually put your finger on something. I don't think many people are consciously saying, "Ha, let's destroy the family," but there are people who, frankly, whose careers depend on broken families, and they do have, even if they don't consciously recognize it, an interest in continuing, uh, broken families maintaining, the current situation, or they also do well if it gets worse. You're right. Um, yeah, and it becomes a chance for them to show compassion. I think you expressed it very well. Let's see what there was something else I was going to say,
what
but
makes
now
you
it
think of the
escapes me.
homeless, the homeless problem in California? The you hear that the budget for homelessness keeps on going up, and then you realize that there are people that are working in this sort of state homeless industry that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And the more homeless people that are there, the more the budget goes up. So they don't have really any incentive to get rid of the homeless
Right.
or actually solve the problem, because then they'd be out of a job. The
Yeah.
problem
No.
solved.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I think
so
you
it
explained it
just
very
that
well.
it's
It's
that
not the
that kind
whole
of
thing, but it's part of what's going on. Yeah.
right. It's just an example of just sort of general rot in any of these systems that are initially designed that sound good, but then they can be corrupted, and then they don't have the incentive to actually solve the problem. Um, okay,
Right.
well,
Well, there was some libertarian that said, like, if you want more of something, subsidize it. So, for example, if you want more poverty, subsidize it. No, you want more broken family, subsidize it. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about.
right.
You know,
helping out single mothers. It sounds like a great thing, but then you start to
Right.
subsidize this type of behavior and more, especially minority families. It's destroyed a lot of black communities. We don't have to dive too far deep into this.
Yeah.
We can switch gears. It was just something that I was just thinking about the other night. I think it's an
Right. Yeah, no, it's
interesting.
a very important subject. It's just something that I haven't really been thinking about. I've thought deeply about it at times in the past, but
I
not
think it
recently.
provided some nice insights, though.